Welcome 1AA Parlay fans to another episode of 1AA Parlay. This is the show where we talk about sports betting in the FCS because that's what we like to do. I'm your host, Colby Peterson. With me once again today to guide us through the craziness that is week 7. Are we on week 7 already? Montana Parlay. Parlay, how are you?
I'm doing well. Looking hard, searching hard for these lines. It's getting harder and harder every week.
It really is, folks. Before we get into all that, I want to shout out the FCS Fans Nation, the Fans Nation Network. Appreciate them for letting us do this show on their network. So make sure you're checking them out on YouTube, or if you're on Facebook, hop into their Facebook group. That's FCS Fans Nation there. And then make sure to follow on Twitter. Lots of good banter going on this week, and it's just a good community to be a part of. But Parlay, you're right, man. This week has been really tough finding lines. It feels like it's getting tougher and tougher each week to find lines. Like right now, I was just telling you, there's not a single game, Big Sky game, up on BetMGM right now. Not one. And it's almost 1 o'clock, or it's noon here in the Central Time Zone. And so, man, maybe they're getting wise.
Yeah, if you're lucky enough, if you're fortunate enough to be in Montana and get to a kiosk, they do have the Big Sky lines up. And sometimes they have value. The juice is a little hot. But if you're in Montana, you should be paying attention to this show because I will have some picks for you at least. Other than that, we're searching hard. We're going to find you something here. We're going to come up with some quality picks. They can't hold us down forever.
Right. Let's take a quick recap, Parlay, of last week because, once again, you had a really good week. I had just a sort of middle-of-the-road week, but let's start with yours. NDSU, UND under at 54.5. Did not hit that one.
No, and if you rewatch the YouTube, I said it'll all depend on how the game starts. If NDSU has to play catch-up, I won't love it. And what happens? North Dakota returns the opening kickoff for a touchdown. And I think at one point in the first quarter, it was like 21-14, and I gave up on the bet early. So, those are tough unders when the team returns the opening kickoff. Then South Dakota had Youngstown State at home, and they looked like they had them dead to rights. Although, if you ever look at those win probabilities on ESPN on this box score, they were up 17 in the second half, and in the win probability was 94%. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, damn, I need to live bet Youngstown State. But, you can't do that in FCS, at least not any books I can see.
No, yeah, they just close it. Whereas, like you said, FBS, you can bet, well into the second quarter.
Oh, yeah. Live bet all day long on FBS and NFL. But FCS, they usually don't allow that. And sure enough, Youngstown ties it up. And usually when you get those types of momentum swings, the team that was ahead ends up losing. But thankfully, South Dakota kicked a field goal to win. -1 covered. That was a win. UNC, I was nervous to bet on Northern Colorado when Sac State usually crushes on the road, but I was right.
Yep.
Whether Sac is down big this year or they were looking ahead to Montana State tonight, either way, that was pretty easy. I think Sac ended up winning by 8. Was that it? 8 or 11?
Yeah,
either way, the plus 24.5 was really never at risk. Finally, the prop bet special of the week, and keep an eye out for that later in this segment because I might be coming back to that one. Jared White over 80 yards. That one was a little nerve-wracking, but he ended up busting one late. He had almost 100 yards, so that one hit. So, 3-1. I mean, if I can go 3-1 every week, I might actually be able to afford Christmas presents this year.
Well, Parlay's doing pretty good. So his record on the season now, pretty good, 15-5. So, like you said, you keep going 3-1 every week, man. That's World Series stuff.
Post any lines.
Yeah. As for me, Harvard came through for me again, -10.5. They absolutely dominated, man. And I'm trying to remember who the opponent was, but like they just smacked them like it wasn't a game. They just absolutely rocked them, and it was like, yes, Harvard. I'm a Harvard man right now. It was Howard. They beat them 48-7, just smashed them. So never in doubt that one. And that game was, I would say, in hand early, I think, right? Where it was like, hey, listen, at the half, it's 28-0. Great. It looks good for me. So that one came through. UND plus 7.5, didn't know what to think about UND, and North Dakota State maybe bouncing back after that South Dakota loss, but UND came in and they were ready to play, and so now there's talk about North Dakota State being the fourth best team in the Dakotas, which, I mean, going into this season, do you think that you would have said those words, Parlay?
No.
Yeah, I would not have said those words either, right?
No, North Dakota State is what, the fourth best team in the Dakotas this year?
I would not have said those words. Yeah. So UND comes through. They don't just cover. They win. They win that game. So if you had money line UND on that, good for you, because I'm sure that was probably pretty tasty. But now let's talk about the bad, because Idaho. Guys, what happened? The Dome was sold out. The Grizz were on the ropes. This looked like a slam dunk, but it wasn't. It was not. Idaho struggled and ends up losing. Obviously they didn't cover the 10.5. They lost. They didn't even win. And so it's like, the Grizz continuing to ruin my life, even when my team is not playing them. So just like, Idaho did not cover, ended up losing the game actually, and sort of shaking up the top 5 now, because a lot of folks had Idaho at maybe number 3 in their rankings. Some had them at 2. Don't know what to do now that they've lost to the Grizz, who have come on of late. And then finally, Hampton let me down. I rode that one till the wheels fell off, We tried to keep Hampton going. Like, I like this. I like where it's going. And that was another game that was just out of hand early. Like, no, Monmouth, they were up at the half. Let's see, 21-14. They were up, a good 35-3 at the half. So, like, yeah, this one's done. That one wasn't going to happen for me. So Hampton let me down, but I don't feel bad because I made the money that I needed to off of Hampton this year, but I think the wheels fell off of that one. So 2-2 for me last week.
Wheels fell off, and I think the car started on fire on that one. But
yeah, it was bad.
Sometimes that happens.
Yeah, that's what happens. So Hampton let me down, but I'm not mad. So that was last week, Parlay. Any parting thoughts before we move into what we found for this week?
Well, I mean, that Montana one hurts. I'm a Bobcat fan, obviously, and I kind of want – it's hard not to root for Idaho. It also looks better for the Bobcats in the short term if Idaho is undefeated in the FCS before we go and hopefully beat them next week. If you go – I think my bias got in the way against the Grizz, because I had the feeling, if you notice, when you were making your picks, I was silent. I didn't say, yeah, I love that pick, because I just had a feeling that, that game was going to be bigger for Idaho than it was for Montana. Montana was on the upswing since they made the change at quarterback. I think Idaho at the end of the day is the better team, but they just came out flat in the first half. And, then the clock ran out, and that was a crazy last few minutes. I was able to catch the last couple minutes because I went to a concert, but I think still like Idaho to scare teams even like the Cats in the future, but they got some work to do on the line. It looks like that was their big weakness up against the Grizz. So
yeah, totally fair. McCoy doing the best that he can with what was given him, because like you said, he was under duress a fair bit in that game, which it's difficult. He's still, I think folks forget that he still is a young quarterback. He's a sophomore and obviously won the Jerry Rice Award last year. He's a great freshman quarterback, but he's still learning the game. And so that pressure from the Grizz defense and that O-line just not standing up as well as I think Coach Eck would have liked created problems for McCoy, and they just couldn't find the offense that they're used to, because they are a good offensive team. So, all right, that's last week. Parlay, like I said, you did really well. I had a mixed bag again. Still learning this thing, I guess. Colby Peterson, also a sophomore at picking bets, apparently, but Parlay is the seasoned veteran, coming out 3-1. So let's talk about this week. Probably of all the lines that we found, because well, like we said, folks, it was tough. Our usual sources didn't have stuff posted all week. We're sort of waiting for the legal sports books to post what they had. Parlay has Sports Bet Montana. What have you seen that has not started? Because obviously it's now 12:30 or so in the Central Time Zone. What have you seen so far that you've liked that folks have a chance at?
Well, there's some interesting line movements. If you follow Sportsbet Montana, they release Cat and Bobcat and Grizz lines early in the week, like Tuesday or Wednesday, and sometimes you can grab some value. Although that hurt you with Montana if you were going against the Grizz last few weeks because they were valuable lines, but when the Grizz cover and win outright, value doesn't mean anything. You got caught on the wrong end of things. So Bobcats could be similar this week. They opened as 10.5-point favorites. To me, as like an odds maker, that's too high. I know the Cats might be a step above everyone else in the Big Sky, knock on wood, as a Cat fan. But that's too many points for a late night game at SAC. It's just too many points. And sure enough, it has moved to 8.5 now on Sportsbet Montana. And I don't have any other lines to compare it to, but I'm guessing it's going to be around 7.5 for the legal books in our states that have, the MGMs, the Bet Rivers, the Caesars, that sort of thing. Those are the three that I've found FCS lines on in the past. They are getting later and later on when they release lines. The one I do like right now on Sportsbet Montana, and I'm hoping my book follows suit, is that Eastern is 3.5-point favorites against Weber. And the two lines that show that the books made adjustments based on the last game, Idaho State versus Eastern, is in my opinion, they over-adjusted on that comeback victory to Idaho State because Portland State is favored by anywhere from 13.5 to 14. That seems a little too much. And Eastern is only favored by 3.5 against Weber, who has not proven that they can score points.
Yep.
So how are they going to do it on the road in the Inferno? So I think both lines are off. Do I want to bet against Portland State? I don't. I honestly think they're a top 3 or 4 team in the Big Sky, and Idaho State's not that great. So that's a stay away from me. But my pick is Eastern minus 3.5. I do like that one. Weber, I know, generally plays them tough. That's a rivalry game of sorts. But again, prove to me that you can score points before, Eastern can score points. I know that. Yeah. So I'm going to take that 3.5 points all day long in the Inferno. That's pick one. I'm hoping the legal sports books follow suit. Here's one where if you are in, a legal betting state, if you have Bet Rivers, MGM, South Dakota, they are on the road, but they're playing who I think might be the worst team in the Valley, and that's the Trees, the Sycamores of Indiana State. They are 19.5-point favorites, a little big line on the road, but if you have what I believe to be the second best team in the Valley, after, of course, the Jackrabbits, playing the worst team, they should win by 21 points. Now, don't go getting crazy on me betting more than a unit. Know your betting sizes, bankroll management. Because South Dakota State goes to Brookings. Wait, where is that game next?
They're going to Carbondale
next week.
Oh, no, this week. They're playing SIU this week. But you're right. Dakota Marker game following week.
So next week, South Dakota plays South Dakota State is what I'm getting at. So sometimes, same thing with Sac State last week. If South Dakota is up by 14 to 17 or 21, they might take the foot off the pedal. They might rest the starters, thinking ahead towards the Jackrabbits next week. Yeah. And the Trees could throw a late garbage cover. So be careful in that game. It's my pick, partially because there's not a lot of other options on the board. Yeah. But I still like it for a unit. South Dakota, as I said, minus 19.5 over the Sycamores. And finally, I'll do another prop. Only 3 picks this week, but it's better to keep them don't go hunting lines, guys. If you don't see something you love, you don't have to bet it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite lines from Warren Buffett is, and it works for stocks and gambling, is you don't have to swing at every pitch. You're not playing baseball. You literally can't strike out if you don't swing. That's where gambling and picking stocks is different than playing baseball. So if you don't like if there's not a good pitch, you don't have to swing. So let's look for good pitches here. My last good, hopefully this is a hanging curveball right here. Jared White, over 85.5 yards. My theory here is if he's the number one guy coming out of that deep stable of running backs at MSU, that always makes me nervous because there's so many guys that can run. But if he's getting 12 or more carries every week like he has been, and they're going to have less than 90 as the total, I'm going to bet it. I'm going to ride that all day long. Hopefully my car doesn't break down like the Hampton vehicle did last week. But I like Jared White, 85 or more yards at Sportsbook Montana. Lay a unit or a unit and a half on that bet. And that's it. 3 picks. Let's go 3-0 this week. I can't really dig too deep for anything more, Kobe.
One thing I realized that we didn't talk about parlay before we hopped into this week's picks, our parlay last week. We had USD -1. That hit. Samford plus 6.5. They ended up losing by just 6, so hung on right there just barely. And then the Idaho pick, -10.5, didn't come through. So that one's my bad.
Yeah, what are you going to do? The worst part is that the Grizz won that, and we lost the bet.
Yeah. Because, I mean, up to that point,
fans happy.
the Grizz were fairly easy to bet against because it felt like the books kept overestimating what they could do, and they kept winning in these close games. And now they were going to see a team, probably one of the toughest teams they'll see. I can't remember if they've got Sac on the schedule or not, but Idaho, in a lot of people's eyes, probably the toughest team that they were going to see until the brawl in Missoula this year. So Cat Grizz was going to be their next tough game, perhaps. I can't, like I said, depending on if they play Sac, I can't remember if they do, but didn't hit. Idaho ended up losing. Let's talk about some of mine. Because like I said, it was difficult to find some of these lines. There was not a lot to go on. Some things, because we did the show a little bit later in hopes of getting more in the legal betting apps or some of these other sites, some have already sailed. There were lines that maybe looked good, but now it's halftime at some of those games or getting close, so you don't get a chance. Like Parlay said, live betting for FCS just doesn't happen. So if you don't get in early, you don't get in. And a lot of these lines are dropping maybe 2 hours before, and it feels like not all of them, I mean, you can tell me what you think, Parlay. It feels like not all of these lines stick around up to kickoff. It seems like BetMGM drops stuff arbitrarily sometimes. I will see something, and then I'll go back in and like, oh, what about that? And it's gone, but it's not kickoff yet. So
yeah, that happened to me last week on Portland State. I missed 2 bets last week. I missed, I don't remember the one, but for sure Portland State, NAU. My thought all season is that Portland State's a lot better than NAU. NAU is getting too much riz from the books because they beat Montana when Montana played a horrible game. They did not play like they have been playing. And then NAU went and beat Weber, a team who hasn't been scoring. So I love Portland State. They were getting 7, and I logged in literally 10 minutes before kickoff, and it disappeared on me. So, yeah, it happens. Then not only do they cover, they win outright, and it wasn't even close. They dominated that game. And
that offense is clicking this year, but it's all on Sachere. Like, he is it for them.
Yeah. So we'll see. Maybe the books are now too high on Portland State, but yeah, it's tough. It's tough out there betting FCS, and my guess is when they get a ton of money one side or the other, they rapidly move lines or they just take them off the board because they don't want too much exposure to stuff that they don't follow that closely.
Yeah. Right here from it, the machine doesn't tell us who, so whoever you are, thanks a bunch. This is the Grizzlies' upcoming schedule, so you get an idea of what's on the road. They do have Sac, so potentially a tough game for them. That was a close game last year. We'll see how they handle it this year. Sac always plays close. That's what they like to do. Heart attack Hornets, I guess. Let's talk about some of my picks, though, man. I've got, from what I found, so I was thinking about going to this game, but it ended up not working out for me. Western Carolina, Furman. Furman is taking the trip to see Western Carolina. I'm not quite sure how you say it. Chloe? I don't know how you say it, guys, but they're going to see Western Carolina. In a lot of people's view, this is probably the SoCon championship game because whoever ends up winning is probably the SoCon champ. So, huge game in the FCS. Winner of this probably gets the auto bid, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the other isn't going to make the playoffs. They both have pretty solid resumes. And the thing with Western Carolina is they like to score a lot of points. That's every game that they've been in so far has just been points. So I looked at this, plus Furman coming to town and Furman liking to score the ball as well. And I said, even though that over is at 63.5, I think I'm going to take it. I took it with Western Carolina against Chat and was rewarded. I think I'm going to do the same thing here. Western Carolina for the over at 63.5 against Furman. The next one, go ahead, Parlay.
I'm glad you brought that game up because that is a marquee matchup, if not the best matchup in the FCS this week. I hemmed and hawed over Western Carolina minus 3.5. I think that's a stay away. If it was less than 3, I'd lean Western Carolina at home after Furman just played a rivalry game of their own. I actually lean under 63.5. I hate to go against you, but
no, it's high. It's high. Don't get me wrong.
We'll see it again. See how it happens in the first half. I mean, here's the thing that's happened in the SoCon. This game could be 10-6 at halftime and still hit the over because we've seen second halves go absolutely nuts in the SoCon this year. They both have quarterbacks that can make plays. So you're not dead to right. If this game starts slow and you take the over, you're not done. And that's why I wish we could bet halves. I would love to bet under first half and over second half. That would be my play. So, I hope you hit this one.
Yeah. So, like you said, Parlay, anything could happen. This could happen. But who knows? Second half will tell the tale. Next up, based on what I had, it was kind of slim pickings for this. And so I was looking through my book saying, okay, what do we have? What do I like? Because like Parlay said, you don't have to bet on some stuff, folks. Even though it's in the app, that doesn't mean you have to bet on it. So being discerning, but also trying to find some opportunities, I ended up going with Tennessee Tech at a plus 18.5. And I'm trying to find it really fast because I'm trying to remember who that opponent was that I was like, yeah, I don't know. I should have put it in the rundown. Let me pull it up in a different app. But I think that Tennessee Tech has not been great. They aren't a great team. It was clear early in the season that they weren't going to be a good team. But they've done some surprising. They've played some closer games. It's kind of like NAU, where NAU has played some close games. They've obviously beat my team a couple of weeks ago. They have a way of just being in some of these games that they probably shouldn't be in. And this is another one where I think that maybe there's an opportunity for the Golden Eagles as well to be close. And 18.5 is a lot. The opponent would have to win by 3 scores or 2.5 scores plus. So I look at that and go, okay, Tennessee Tech against SEMO. SEMO have been chokers lately. I mean, they've choked 3 straight games, I think, in the last 3 weeks in the fourth quarter. They choked. Yeah, they choked the playoff game against Montana last year when they had that game in hand. Grizz came back and beat them in the second half. Just SEMO has this way of letting teams back in. And so I looked at Tennessee Tech plus 18.5, and I liked it because of the way that SEMO has behaved in the past few weeks.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. That's good.
Yeah, so like I said, this is necessarily a bet for Tennessee Tech. It's more of a bet against SEMO because of what we've seen from them. And of everything that I've seen so far, I haven't seen any Big Sky lines yet in my app, and so I'm kind of waiting for some of those. But for the non-Big Sky lines that I have seen, those are the two that stick out to me that I would say, yeah, I think I'll put a half a unit down or so. Actually, Parlay, I just got one that came up. And do you like, so it's Portland State, Idaho State, Portland State minus 12.5. What do you think?
Whew, that is, I think that's in stay away land for me. I'm leaning Portland State, but I might be biased there. I might be on the wrong end of that. I have a buddy of mine who tracks us pretty close. He likes Idaho State getting more than 10. So I'm thinking about just betting him straight up to avoid the VIG on the books. But, man, that's a tough one because Idaho State proved they can score in a hurry. Yeah. So those, even if Portland State is better, they could easily win by 6 to 10 points, with a dominating performance and lose the backdoor cover or not cover, So yeah, I think that's a stay away for me. Could have kept the answer short.
Over under 67.5.
High score, yeah.
Yeah, but
I wouldn't go under in that game.
Yeah, I was like, it's a really high over under. I'm tempted, but it's really high. Like you said, we saw Idaho State put a lot of points on the board in the second half against Eastern and come back and beat them last week. Portland State has gotten the job done with their offense so far this season. It's one of the reasons why they're not terrible in the Big Sky right now is because they can put up a lot of points on the board. But 67.5, it's like, I don't know. I might just have to watch it and think about it. I'm not willing to put that one out. So, Parlay, let's do our weekly. What do you think for this week's Parlay?
This is going to be hard with how slim the pickings are. I guess I have to go South Dakota minus 19.5 is my pick.
Okay, USD minus 19.5. For me, I think I'm going to take that WCU Furman over 63.5. I think both teams are going to score a lot. I think Western Carolina, last time I checked, had the number one offense in the country. Cole Gonzalez is I think, honest to goodness, Walter Payton Award candidate. I don't hate it. I'm taking the WCU Furman over at 63.5. Last one for you, Parlay.
I'm seeing a lot of talk in the chat about the Cats offense and maybe their defense needs to step it up. Outside of that Weber game, and then the SDSU game, I think every FCS game they've played has been over. There was an overcorrection. Sportsbet Montana opened the total at like 63.5. It's now down to 58.5.
Oh.
So let's go over 58.5 in Montana State SAC.
I don't hate it because, like you said, SAC, not a great team usually at home. They make their money on the road. Yeah. That was in the Troy Taylor era. It's a different era. But the Cats coming in with the rush offense that they do have, I like them to put at least 40 up. And so if SAC can find a couple of touchdowns, there you go.
And if that line is 10 or higher, I like SAC. If it's 7, I like Montana State. I have no idea where it's going to be on legal books. Like I said, Sportsbet Montana opened at 10.5. It's now down to 8.5. So yeah, let's make the over 58.5 the third leg of that parlay.
Okay. So we've got Cats, Hornets over at 58.5. That in here. 58.5. All right. Those are our 3 legs for this week. When you get an opportunity to see that one's not in my sports betting app yet, but it will be hopefully soon. I agree with you. I think if SAC is anything plus anything more than one touchdown, one possession, take them because they play close. They always do. But anything less than that, probably take the Cats.
Agreed.
All right, man. That's everything that we've got for you folks this week. We want to shout out once again the Fans Nation Network. Appreciate them for letting us do their show or this show on their network on YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitter. Really appreciate everybody who's been interacting, hanging out with us, chatting in the comments here. A lot of fun hanging out with some folks. If you have an opportunity, make sure to follow FCS Fans Nation on Facebook and their YouTube or in their Facebook page, on YouTube and on Twitter. That's where the community's hanging out. That's where it's at. Ron, you're the GOAT today, man. Ron has been in the chat and he's been giving us a lot. So appreciate it, Ron. Shout out. But aside from that, that's this week. We'll watch and see what it goes. Keep watching your sports book app to see what comes through. And like Parlay said, bet the best, leave the rest.
Good luck, people.